Okay. Okay, ready now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our new show, Monday Night Stream. We haven't figured out a name yet, but if you have a name we can figure out. But it seems like people really like this because this has been our most popular stream. And I guess what we're doing is each week we're going to like some kind of like, it's the mainstream, like critical media analysis is the best one. And maybe like learning a little about a little about what's going on in the world. Somebody, Abri Lau said he's coming from the Vanguard. So please, yes, invite your friends from the Vanguard, which I don't know what it is, but invite them and have them come. Okay, sorry. You want me to come closer to the mic? Today we have Hassan Al. So our first guest today is Hassan Al Tayyib. Hassan El Tayyib. And he works for the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which is the oldest anti-war, anti-imperialist lobby in the United States. And he's in charge of working with Congress and Senate to end the U.S.-Saudi alliance and blockade in Yemen. And so welcome, Hassan. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me on today, Esha.
Well, thank you so much for coming on in such short notice. We appreciate it. So what we, I guess what, well, first things first is that we always try to get the real story as opposed to what the media focuses on, because we know that the U.S. media is not very careful when it, I mean, at best, like, I guess I don't like to accuse more than I have proof for. So at best, we can say they're not very careful about learning about like different historical situations and different nuances that go into like, generally it's like the farther away they're from the imperial cord, like the more not nonsense just goes in. So what I noticed with Yemen is there was just a big silence for the most part. But I guess right before we were talking backstage, you said that there were some, I guess, narratives and some, for lack of a better word, propaganda or push stories that just kind of give people the wrong impression. So let's first things first. What is the blockade for people who don't know anything about Yemen?
Well, thank you so much for asking that question and giving me a platform to kind of help break some of these things down. I think it's really important. First off, I mean, I wanted to say that the United States has been a primary backer of the Saudi UAE-led war in Yemen and blockade. And for more than 6 years, Saudi Arabia has imposed an air, land, and sea blockade on Yemen that's restricted the flow of food, fuel, medicine, and even clean water. And these restrictions have been a leading driver in the world's worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. There are now 16 million people living in Yemen that are living a step away from famine. There are 2.3 million children living with acute malnutrition, and 400,000 of those children are living with severe acute malnutrition, and that means that they could die in weeks or months without urgent treatment. Now, this is a generation of children that are being impacted by U.S. support for the Saudi blockade, and the UN is basically saying that this could plunge Yemen into the biggest famine in modern history. And since January 2021, Saudi Arabia, since the start of the war, they've been imposing the blockade, and the United States have been providing military support, weapon sales, logistical, intel sharing, spare parts, maintenance. But they've since tightened that blockade, especially around fuel imports since January. And really, hindering, the shipments of fuel and really hurting hospitals' abilities to function and the delivery of food and medicine. So even though it's just fuel, it's hindering the ability of folks all across Yemen in Houthi-governed areas to be able to get these vital resources. So it's a really critical issue.
So what is stuff before the blockade? What are stuff that Yemen used to import before the blockade that they can't get now? I know you said medicine, food, fuel, yeah, which is everything you need to live. But I guess.
Yeah, great question. So before the war, Yemen was already the poorest country in the Middle East. They imported 80 to 90% of its food, and they
Oh,
produced about 10 or 20% of its food. I've seen different estimates on that. And that, and unfortunately, Saudi Arabia has done a ton of airstrikes in Yemen targeting this vital economic and agricultural infrastructure. So at the start of the war, they actually blew up livestock, markets, all of this infrastructure. So the remaining infrastructure they had was destroyed at the beginning of the war, and they rely on these imports coming in. And commercial traffic is all but shut down at this point because of this blockade. And humanitarian aid is even, having trouble getting through. So across the board, it's really exacerbating the humanitarian crisis.
okay. So, is Saudi Arabia backing any militias or like any militaries in Yemen?
Yeah, so it's a little complex. If I can just give a brief
Go for it.
overview of how this all started.
Of course.
So in 2011, there was the Arab Spring in Yemen, and the people of Yemen nonviolently ousted then President Saleh from power. And they installed Vice President Hadi to be an interim leader as they moved to a more representative form of government. And as these things go, there was a lot of corruption. There was, some complex issues between, different factions in Yemen. The Houthis, it was the Houthi movement, Ansar Allah. They were, concerned about what the Hadi government was doing. They rose up and partnered with Saleh and ousted Hadi. Hadi fled to Riyadh, and then basically asked Saudi Arabia for support. The UN was then brokering a peace deal. Unfortunately, Jamal Ben Ammar, the UN envoy to Yemen, they had secured a deal actually with the warring parties on the ground in Yemen. And then Saudi, because he's on a UN mission to try to, make peace in Sana'a. And then a day or two later, he looks out his hotel window and airstrikes started falling without his knowledge.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty wild. And this is right as they were coming to an agreement. And since then, Saudi Arabia has just been, trying to prop up the UN recognized government in Hadi, and just have been punishing the, people of Yemen as a result. Houthis actually make up about 5% of the population. So this is a form of collective punishment, which is a war crime. They say they're going after the Houthis, but who's really getting hurt are innocent men, women, and children, not Houthi officials, not commanders. So it's a disaster. Now, the Hadi government also is partnering, the coalition formed, a bunch of Arab governments came together, 9 to be correct, and they partnered with the UAE, who's backing the Southern Transitional Council in Yemen. So there are other factions in Yemen that are trying to get the Houthis out. So we call it the Saudi UAE-led coalition, or more appropriately, the U.S.-backed Saudi UAE-led coalition. And this started under the Obama administration. At the time, they were trying to work out the Iran nuclear deal and try to get the U.S. into compliance with the JCPOA and get Iran to, give up its nuclear proliferation in exchange for sanctions relief. And, there was a bit of a deal that happened where the Obama administration said, okay, we're going to militarily support your war in Yemen. And, that is how the whole thing started. There was a UN Security Council resolution, this really broken UN process that is still being used today that sort of legitimized the blockade, legitimized what the Hadi government is doing. And, as a result, we've got the world's worst humanitarian crisis on the planet.
Oh, wait, how did they legitimize the blockade, I guess?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. So the blockade was going on actually before that UN Security Council Resolution 2216. One of the things we're trying to do is actually replace that UN Security Council resolution to get a more balanced, form of diplomacy going on. But they established Section 15 in there, and so they wanted to put in place an arms embargo to prevent, weapons from getting in. And it actually basically said that neighboring states could inspect all vessels coming into the country.
and that's the loophole they use.
Yeah, and they also established this other UN verification and inspection mechanism where the UN approves these ships. But unfortunately, here's something that I think is really interesting and not enough people know about, is that these ships that we're talking about wanting to get into Yemen, these fuel ships, they've all been approved by the UN. They've been inspected. There are no weapons on these ships. So that is just a completely false narrative that somehow lifting the blockade will mean weapons get into the country. Just not true. Even the Biden administration says that the system works quite well in their own words. So I think that's another key piece. It basically legitimized the blockade. They say, we want to prevent arms from getting in. That's why Saudi Arabia can hold up these commodities getting through the ports.
But it seems like arms are clearly getting in some other way because there's a war going on, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's another interesting question. There may be arms shipments getting in. It's questionable how they're getting in. I mean, some people think, Yemen was already the most armed country in the Middle East. I think per capita, second only to the U.S. And a lot of these weapons, the U.S. actually has the receipts for because we sold them to ex-President Saleh. He had this really interesting way where he would, on top of the Saudi-led war in Yemen, there's also the war against Al Qaeda in Yemen under the 2001 AUMF. And what Saleh would do is he would, capture Al Qaeda members and then let them go and tell the Americans, hey, I need more weapons to go after Al Qaeda. Of course, people in Washington, D.C. and both sides of the aisle say, okay, we got to, terrorism, we got to give them all these weapons, and they would do that and then recycle, repeat. So a lot of this stuff was fabricated, national security risks that, the Saleh government was using to get more weapons. So a lot of these are actually U.S. weapons. There's another thing where the Saudis and the Houthi government, they've basically lost the war. The Houthis already control 80% of the country, and they've defeated a lot of Saudi and Houthi forces, and they've taken their weapons. So that's a lot of what you're seeing here, weapons that were already there and weapons that were stolen, from defeated soldiers on the other side. When I say the other side, I mean like the Houthis are taking Saudi, UAE, Hadi, STC weapons.
Okay. So that's what's keeping the war still alive, I guess.
I mean, yeah, and there probably is, and there is, Iranian weapons getting smuggled in. It's, I think there's a lot of corruption in Yemen, and warlords are going to warlord, and profiteers are going to profiteer. Unfortunately, there's blood on the hands of all sides in this conflict. The Houthis have committed war crimes. The Saudis have committed war crimes. The UAE has committed war crimes. STC has committed war crimes. The U.S., UK, France, Canada, and other backers of the coalition, but just through helping the coalition commit war crimes, are also complicit, according to the UN, or maybe complicit in their own words.
Okay. What does US, UK, France, and I guess Canada have to gain from helping the Saudis in this conflict? Why do they have a dog in this conflict?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So the US and Saudi Arabia have had this really, horrible alliance essentially that started in 1945, I believe, with FDR and King Abdulaziz. They famously shook hands on an aircraft carrier in the Suez Canal and cemented this relationship. We'll give them security assistance. We'll give them the security umbrella, weapon sales, and in turn, secure oil. I mean, this is about oil, and so there's just been this inertia for years and decades that have been bipartisan of supporting Saudi Arabia and even the UAE now. So I think obviously weapon sales are a piece. Another piece of it, though, is that the U.S. still sees itself as like a hegemon in the Middle East, and we definitely want to control foreign policy there. We give weapon. This is not a unique situation. We give military support to Jordan in exchange for security partnerships. Around Israel, Egypt. UAE, Bahrain, Lebanon, and others. So we definitely have a massive foothold in the region. I'll just also add that the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on the western side of Yemen, that goes by Hodeidah and by Djibouti. 6.3 million barrels of oil go through that strait a day.
So they want the port, keep that port open.
And that's another piece. And it's not just oil. There's a lot of commodities that flow through that port. So that's another key geostrategic location. And Saudi Arabia has just, had Yemen under its thumb for decades and decades, definitely under the leadership of Saleh. So that's another thing. They have their own inertia where they want to control their neighbor to the south. They would probably say, they tell the world that we don't want these Iranian-backed terrorists to be controlling, parts of Yemen under our border. One thing I try to remind people and lawmakers and folks in the media is that there's a saying in Yemen that you have to know to be able to understand what the mentality here is my brother, me and my brother versus my cousin. Me and my cousin versus the stranger. And so that is just key to understand, I think, what's happening here is they see Saudi, UAE, and they see U.S. made, on some of the missiles that are falling on them. And they see, they see this coalition as foreign aggressors. And, they may not agree with the Houthis, but on a lot of things, they may not completely agree with the STC or even, but ultimately, they see Saudi Arabia and the UAE as trying to dictate terms to them, and the people of Yemen, I don't see, many of them don't want that. And they are, unfortunately, the Houthis, like I said, they're committing, war crimes, atrocities, but some Yemenis are saying that that's a better situation than being controlled by colonizers like the UAE and Saudi.
I'm sorry, but I would have to. I may be biased against the Saudis, but I would have to concur on that. But it seems like that saying almost sounds like America. You kind of have a similar saying where it says "blood is thicker than water" or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so did the Biden administration in their electoral campaign say hint at a policy or talk about a difference in policy from the Trump administration?
So yeah, there's been just to rewind a little bit before that to give some context. In 2016, there started this advocacy on the Hill, bipartisan advocacy to block a cluster bomb sale to Saudi Arabia. So that was, we didn't ultimately win that vote, but it was the start of something. And then in 2017, 2018, 2019, and even 2020, Congress forced vote after vote after vote on, Yemen war powers, resolutions to, they wanted to reassert their congressional war authority. Keep in mind, this war was never authorized by Congress, and under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, only Congress can declare war. So Obama committing U.S. military participation in the Yemen war and Trump continuing that participation, and even Biden continuing that participation, it's a violation of our own Constitution. So Congress was really upset about not only the humanitarian crisis and U.S. complicity in that crisis, but also the fact that the war was never authorized. There was never a vote and a debate. And they passed several resolutions. They passed resolutions of disapproval to block arms sales to both Saudi and the UAE. They passed amendments to the Pentagon budget. And so there was this real momentum heading into the Biden administration. And that's one thing that he said. He said that Saudi Arabia and MBS, because of Khashoggi, because of Yemen, they were a pariah, and that there would be fundamental changes going on. On February 4th, Biden basically made an announcement that, hey, everybody, we're correcting course. We're going to end U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. We're going to restore aid, humanitarian aid, which Trump had cut in March the year prior. We're going to restore that aid to all parts of Yemen, which was good. and we're going to lift this FTO, Foreign Terrorist Organization designation on the Houthis, which would have been a disaster for humanitarian aid delivery, because if you're a humanitarian aid worker, if you deliver aid to a terrorist or do any financial transactions, you then could go to jail.
Even if it's like bandages or like antibiotics?
Exactly. That was the risk of the FTO designation. So Biden did those three things at the start of his administration. He also said he'd put a pause button on weapons. So
has that happened?
Now, unfortunately, the devil is in the details.
Okay. What does that mean?
The devil's in the details here, because we never really got a clear understanding of, well, you said you're going to end support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen. Mm-hmm. But what does offensive mean, and what does defensive mean? Does offensive mean our support for the blockade? We still don't have answers to some of these questions. Are you defining the blockade as an offensive operation? As I definitely would. I think that's an offensive operation that's really punishing the people of Yemen. Are you defining, how are you defining weapon sales? Like, okay, which weapon sales are defensive, right? A missile can be fired across borders. It's hard to say. And also, there's this funny little thing called maintenance and spare parts, which the Saudi war fleet is incredibly dependent on the steady flow, almost daily flow of spare parts, like replacement tires for F-15s. Almost every time they land, you have to replace these tires, and you can't get these at Walmart, trust me. You need to have U.S. approved contracts, and all that maintenance support and spare parts transfers is continuing. They've said that they're continuing, an advisory role for defensive operations against the Houthis. Does a defensive operation mean an airstrike in Yemen to prevent an attack into Saudi? That, to me, that's a really blurry line that we don't really know. So we're asserting that, just even through the maintenance support, which the Pentagon has already said that we've continued to provide, which is critical for the enforcement of the blockade. These warplanes are preventing ships from it's not just naval vessels, but also warplanes. So what we're trying to do is get Congress to put real pressure on the Biden administration to end all support on the Saudi-led war in Yemen. We had some great momentum with statements. We had Rep. Dingell. She led a 76-member letter to Biden saying, lift the blockade. We had a letter by the House Foreign Affairs Chairman, Rep. Meeks, and his colleagues on that committee say, lift the blockade, decouple it from ongoing negotiations, lift it as a humanitarian act. Senator Warren also led a 16-member letter, and they're saying not only lift the blockade, but U.S. should use leverage to get Saudi to lift the blockade in weapon sales, maintenance support, military support. So this is great, but it hasn't happened yet. We're still at a standstill. Not enough commodities are getting through these ports. So we're now asking Congress to introduce a Yemen War Powers resolution again and try to get Biden to sign it and once and for all end all military support to the Saudi UAE-led coalition war and blockade on Yemen. And that's our ask for Congress right now. So
has a Secretary of State Blinken indicated any policy differences between him and, Pompeo, I guess?
Well, I mean, all the things I mentioned, were definitely good steps. I give credit where I see it, and lifting the FTO designation was great. Restoring humanitarian aid was great. Ending, some of the support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, but they haven't gone far enough. I mean, this is the world's worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. A child is dying every 75 seconds in Yemen.
Wow.
Every 75 seconds, a kid is dying. And the kids that are living through an absolute hell. They're getting brain damage. Malnutrition creates cognitive issues for the rest of the life of these children. Oh, wow. Yemen's going to be dealing with this war, just like the mental trauma of this war and the cognitive effects for this whole generation of children for generations. And the U.S. is backing the war effort, backing the blockade. It's literally starving these children and using the starvation of children as a bargaining chip to get Houthi concessions. That's what's going on with our taxpayer dollars right now.
Wow. Okay. So I guess like so let's say the blockade's lifted. Like then would it be just like how would they get food there? Like would they be just like what's going to happen? Let's imagine a world where we can lift just the blockade right now with the magic wand. Like how would that fix the situation?
Well, one, it would allow commodities to get through Hodeidah port and Salif port unimpeded. So there were, I think in February, like 14 massive fuel vessels just waiting to offload the fuel that had been approved by the U.S. And that fuel needs to get into the country. As much as I don't want a world dependent on fossil fuels, it's really critical for humanitarian aid and the economy. If you start a business in Yemen, you can't sell things overseas. Wouldn't that be nice if you were able to do that? Also, Sana'a Airport needs to open up, even just to get Mercy flights going. If you have, a dear friend of mine, her sister had she had cancer and wasn't able to leave to get special treatment because she was stuck stuck by the restrictions on Sana'a Airport, and she died.
Oh my God.
That's just one of many stories, and how many people can't even, they don't have the fuel, and as a result of the blockade, the prices have skyrocketed. The prices have skyrocketed, and like I said, warlords are gonna warlord. There's corruption with the Houthis, STC, the Hadi government. They're all profiteering, and the people are they're bearing the brunt of it across the board. And that false scarcity is really incentivizing corruption, really raising the prices, and also just preventing the actual commodities from getting into the country in the first place. So, and not to mention just leaving. People should be able to leave and have self-determination and go where they want to go. I think, we were all stuck in the U.S. under COVID. And imagine being like that, but also a war zone. For 6 years.
Wow. Yeah. How's the water situation in Yemen? Do they have enough water, or do they need to import that too?
Yemen is running out of water. There are parts of the country that get flooded during the spring months, but unfortunately, because of the lack of clean water, there is the world's largest cholera outbreak. There's 2 or 3 million, basically over 2 million cases of cholera. I've seen numbers that go all the way up to 3 million at points.
Wow.
And 3 million cases of cholera at some points in this war, and that can be cured with clean water and antibiotics.
Okay. So do you need to? Okay. So that's another situation that. Piled on. It seems like it's like a cascade effect where things pile on top of each other.
We haven't even talked about COVID.
Okay, go for it.
I know it is a pile-on effect, and there's so many other issues that I'm not even mentioning. But COVID-19, the highest fatality rate in the world for COVID is in Yemen. It's about 30%.
What's the percentage again?
30% of the people that are contracting COVID in Yemen are dying because and the people of Yemen, when I've got contacts and folks that are doing humanitarian aid, they say Yemenis aren't worried about COVID. Even with that high fatality rate, they're worried about the hunger. They're worried about that painful death.
Wow.
And so that's not one of their top priorities at this point because of the malnutrition of this generation of children that's going on, and because of the hunger and the lack of fuel. Imagine living without electricity in the hot heat. It gets really hot in New York. Imagine just no AC. It gets hot in Phoenix. Imagine no AC. That's what we're talking. No lights on at night.
Or cooking fuel. Like you can't cook with the gas stove.
Your mom needs a surgery, and the hospital only has 1 hour of lights on a day.
because of the fuel. Okay, so that's very. I'm glad you're mentioning this because I had never tied all these together in my mind. Somehow it just like was separate in my mind. So, So like now you're explaining how all of these are tied to the overall blockade.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a disaster. This is something Congress can do something about right now. We've set up on at FCNL and the blockade.com. Mm-hmm. That's a quick and easy way to get your member of Congress to make a public statement about this at the very least. And they should be hearing from their constituents. And on top of that, if folks want to go above and beyond, they should call their lawmaker and say, please introduce a Yemen War Powers resolution. Bernie Sanders did it before. He should do it again. Senator Warren's been good on this, but she should go one step further and introduce a War Powers resolution. Ro Khanna in California, he's been great on this, but he should go a step further. Introduce a Yemen War Powers resolution. Any single one of these members, literally all they have to do is take a piece of paper, slide it across the table to Ledge Council, and just say, I want to force a vote. And within 15 legislative days, we're going to have our vote on ending the war.
Oh, so what's stopping it? Like, what can we do, I guess? What can people who are watching the stream do to stop that?
Well, they need to call their lawmakers. I mean, the thing that's stopping this is I think, when it's the opposing party that is, in office, it's really easy to say, we got to end our complicity. We got to, go to the mat here. It's the world's worst humanitarian crisis, unauthorized. Here's a Yemen War Powers resolution. It's a little harder when it's your own party. And unfortunately, I think, that is playing a huge role. And, they see this as expending political capital. And if they're hearing from a lot of constituents, they're going to change that calculus in their brains.
What is political I've never understood what it doesn't matter, I guess.
Well, okay, they care about Yemen. Yemen's the world's worst humanitarian crisis, but they also care about, infrastructure. Mm-hmm. They also care about, the NDAA or the Pentagon budget. They care about jobs in their district. They care about, climate change. They care about a number of really important things that have, huge implications for their districts. But what we're trying to say is, okay, that's all important. But we can, as a country, try to do something about this war that we've backed for 6 years. And, to spend a few hours on the House floor and the Senate floor and have a vote and a debate and really put pressure on the administration and, more importantly, Saudi Arabia and the UAE to end this conflict immediately. And once we end this blockade, these goods can get into the country, and that's what's critical. I mean, this is a man-made famine. That's what's going on here.
Okay. Just curious. I know this may be a little out, but let's say that we have somebody from Europe watching our stream. Like, can they do something? Like, should they also contact their parliament? Like, do they have anything to do, or is it mostly a U.S. thing? Yeah,
I mean, so I named a few countries, UK, France.
We have a lot of UK viewers.
Yeah, a lot of you. If you're in the UK, your government is still selling weapons to Saudi. If you're in France, your government's still selling weapons to Saudi. If you're in Canada, your government's still selling weapons to Saudi. And those weapons need to be cut off. I mean, there's a lot of activism going on. You need to write your parliament, make sure that they put some pressure, on your executive branches and put pressure on the Saudi coalition. Another thing that we need to do, like I said earlier, is to restore, I shouldn't say restore, replace the old UN Security Council resolution that basically establishes this really unbalanced framework. The resolution was written by Saudi Arabia, essentially, and it says that the Houthis need to give up their territory, lay down their weapons, and it establishes the framework for some of the blockade tactics that we're seeing, and that just needs to be replaced. So if the UK actually holds the pen on Yemen at the UN, and so that's another thing that you can do in the UK in particular and in France is help us replace this broken framework for diplomacy that is just completely unrealistic after 6 years of war and blockade, where the Houthis now govern 80% of the country.
Do you have a on your website? Do you have like a model resolution or something that they could like mail in or something like that? Like something that would help them if they wanted.
Well, yeah, I would go to fcnl.org and go to our Middle East page. There are a bunch of resources, a bunch of letters on there that are
Okay.
calling for
I'm
the.
sending it right now. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
And so you okay. And then is there? You said there was a call of action that you wanted to send people.
yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Endtheblockade.com basically, is a really simple tool that you can use to write your member of Congress, and it generates a letter right to them, and it says, I want you to call on the Biden administration to lift the blockade on Yemen.
Okay. And usually, if you
And
call your
basically calling on the Biden administration to convince Saudi Arabia to lift their blockade and use leverage to do it. So
okay, so what's the website again? Endtheblockade.com.
exactly.
Okay, well, we'll share that. And usually, like a lot of times, you should reach your congressional representative through the local. Is there any straight like local office?
Well, what's nice about the endtheblockade.com is if you plug in your address, it'll generate an email to your local rep, so it'll go right to your member.
Okay, but you should also print out and send them a physical mail because that cannot go to the spam filter.
Exactly. Well, I think that's wonderful too. And you're someone who knows the deal. Yeah, I think that's great. Going to findyourrep.com, that can be a good way to track them. The website will be on there. There'll be a form that you can fill out and saying, I want end the war in Yemen. I want to lift the blockade. I want a new resolution to end support for the war. I think that would be great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And like I know you're on Twitter. We can share that. And the website is fcnl.org, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Please visit FCNL. And Hassan has written he has a lot of good articles about Yemen to learn more. And thank you so much for coming. And I hope we can have you back on the stream in like the upcoming months again. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me a platform
Oh,
to
always.
discuss this issue. It means a lot to me. My family's from the Middle East. I have family in Jordan, but I've also got some relatives in Yemen. I've got a lot of friends in Yemen, and it breaks my heart. And I want to do everything I can because I pay tax dollars here, and those tax dollars are being used to oppress millions of people in a country that does not deserve to be oppressed.
No country deserves to be oppressed. So I agree with you on that. And of course, anytime, any action, anything, like please come back because we really want to be on the side of the oppressed. Like that's like our entire mission. So
Right.
and decolonizing. So we hate colonialism here. So thank you so much and have a rest of the day. I hope the weather kind of cooperates a little with some sun for you.
You got it. Thank you so much. Take care.
Yep. Okay. So can you hear me still? Thank you guys so much. Let's see. Jenna, are we ready to share? Okay, can we share the one tweet with the United States Embassy in POS? Yes, activist asked, do Western countries need to be oppressed by a dictatorship? Yes, Western countries need to be oppressed. All of them. Oh, let me send it to you again. It's about the 80. Oh God, it's so offensive. Like, it's like, okay, hold on. Okay. How many fingers am I holding up? Now tell me how many fingers. How many fingers? Can you see my finger? Okay. What am I holding up a cup of? Okay. Can you hear? Okay. Am I holding up juice or coffee? What is in my hand? Juice or coffee? So type in juice if you're hearing this. Okay. I need you to type in juice. Somebody type in juice. Juice. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, excellent. Okay. So yeah, yesterday the US embassy in POS, which is I know Port of Spain, but I prefer calling it piece of sent out this most offensive tweet. So let's share that.
Okay. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. I was working on the audio. So
no, don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, I got it. It'll just take me 1 second to put it up now.
Oh god. Okay, now it's an echoing. Okay. Boy, it's echoing.
It shouldn't be echoing now. It was just for
okay. It shouldn't be echoing now. Anyways, the thing is that the U.S. is already bullying countries, and okay, so what you see is with Russia, the Sputnik vaccine. They just let Argentina produce whatever they want. Like they're just like, okay, here's the virus. They just gave them the formula and said, go have fun with it. Send it to everyone in Argentina. Like make sure everyone's immunized. They did that with Mexico. They just gave them it was all. And the U.S. of course had tried to get Argentina to mortgage their bases. And then the Argentina was like, go away, you psychos. And then what we then had was Brazil, who's with Bolsonaro, who did not do the Sputnik, but every other Latin American country did Sputnik. So with Trinidad, if Trinidad's not doing the Sputnik, it probably means the U.S. has some sort of bomb or some sort of bully thing or regime change up or something psycho going on there. Anyways, so let me know when you get. Okay, so
okay, it's up on there now.
Okay, this is so offensive. So let's read this. The government of the United States of America made a donation of COVID vaccines to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The donation includes 80 vials.
Yeah, that's 200 doses. No, I'm sorry, 400 doses, so it's 200, because you need two doses. Yeah.
Whatever. 80 vials. The United States, this is so offensive. Because the country has 1.3 million people. And they're going to die. I mean, well, many will, because they won't have vaccines. And it's clearly colonized country. It's in the Caribbean. They deindustrialized. God knows what U.S. has done to that so far. Let's just, I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'm sure it's not good. But 80 vials, that's just, why would they even tweet it out? They need to be quiet about this. And it's goes to show you that the relationship that the U.S. has with the world, with a lot of these countries, it's complete colonizer bullying relation. What the hell? It's very insulting. And I don't know what's going on here, but I was just so offended by this. They need to be sending.
Asha, they were actually going to the National Security or the Ministry of National Security in Trinidad and Tobago as a gift. So they're
going to the Ministry of. So it's not.
Yeah. So basically, the police. They're giving it to the police, and not the people.
Yeah. So they're giving it to random government officials, and I guess maybe so. It's. I don't even know why they're wasting time shipping 80 of them. That's just 80 vials. That's nothing. It's they need a few million vials. So that is kind of shows you what a crap. Whenever the U.S. says that it does something, you guys always need to follow it up to make sure they already do it. Because what happens is for the press release, they'll claim a lot, but end up delivering very little. I mean, the one thing that I can still remember is a few years ago when AOC and Ted Cruz claimed that they were going to sign a bill, co-sponsor a legislation to ban or lobbying for members of Congress, and they never did that. And no follow-up. I know this is a little bit of a magical thinking, but it's not. Just knowing exactly what the U.S. government does not do and keeping a tally helps a lot in waking up people's political consciousness, if that makes sense. So half of the battle is just for you to know what's going on. And yeah, so here, like, and then what you see is that the US has allegedly promised, allegedly by the end of June, to release 60 million alleged doses of vaccine, but obviously they're not. But they've, like, the entire US news media has said that, oh, Biden administration, in March, they said that they were going to allegedly release 60 million doses, but they have not done that. But that's not going to get covered, the fact that they didn't do it. So Americans are always going to get a filtered version of what happened, because of course the US will not release it, because they should have released at least like 40 million, and it's more like 0 doses have been released, maybe a little bit, but nothing significant. And so the Philippines, like, I was looking at the foreign minister of Philippines, and he said that the Philippines has the currency, but they didn't have it back in 2019 to do a long-term plan. And they basically are willing to buy it from anyone who wants to sell it. But now, like, Canada's hoarding like twice the number of doses as there are people. The US is hoarding a few million. And so people in the Philippines will be dying because of that. Anyways, it just kind of shows you that there's even thought, like, imperialism, like, eats up everything, like, in ways you don't realize. Our next guest is Ali ready?
I don't know. He's not here yet.
Okay, well, wait.
I did send that to him. Did you want to discuss what our name's going to be?
I don't know yet. Okay, let's, like, we've had
someone wants it to be Mondays with,
yeah,
what's going on?
okay, so somebody said Mondays with Marx. We don't, and somebody said Mondays with Stalin, and somebody said Mao Mondays. I don't know. None of this feels like right yet. We'll figure it out.
Well, because you're not really having Marx or Stalin. I had the one that I was going to put up instead of Sundays with Lenin was Mondays with Esha, but
and yet we'll figure something out. We need like, we'll just have a placeholder until we figure out what the name is, because I'm not feeling any of these names for some odd reason. Are you feeling any of the names?
No, like I said, like, we're not really. If we were focusing just on, like, if we were focusing on like Marx theories and stuff like that,
well, maybe we can develop something in the future to kind of Okay, so somebody said the U.S. should allow other countries vaccines here too, like Cuba's. Yes, but they won't, because they want to protect private pharma's profits. And if you allow a state-owned vaccine, everyone's going to get that, so they won't. And that's basically what capitalism is.
You did copy one more comment. If you want me to put that in.
Yes, let's show that. What was the comment?
Hold on. Let me just make it a little bigger so everyone can see it. They said, countries can't trust the USA. These are our times. No,
they never could trust the USA, because the USA was always into capitalism. With capitalism, they'll do whatever is necessary for profit, so you can never trust it. But you would hear about all the horrible stuff the US did a lot less.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, Neil Singer may have some good one. Propaganda Smashing Mondays, that might be a good one. Let's think about that. So we'll keep that as a maybe. And then, yeah, like, the thing is that back in the good old days, you just didn't hear about all the death squads. Oh, okay. Dimitri Palikmikos said, Trail of Aung San Suu Kyi. Do you mean trial? I don't know, actually. But I will try. Maybe for next week, we'll have a guest on the Myanmar situation, because Mango Press had a really good article about it. So let's do that. I'll figure out somebody to invite for next week, because yeah, there's so many weird things going on there that I can't actually understand. Neil Sanger asked, hey, Isha, can you get Dave Emery at some point? I don't know who Dave Emery is, but Maybe.
I'll make a note.
Okay. I don't know who he is, but if you can figure out a way to connect me and who he is, perhaps. Okay, yeah. Dimitri met trial. I don't know anything about it. So I will try to get somebody on who can tell us about it. So it seems like okay, so somebody said Brian Berletic or Berletic. I don't know. Whatever that is, yes, we will have that. Yeah, because I have, like, the thing is I don't trust everyone because I don't trust most people because, well, they're not very smart and they're not very discerning and they just don't, they all have Dunning-Kruger effects. They don't even try to fight, like, they don't even try to understand the situation, let alone, like, I just don't trust most people. So that's why it's like when I don't know something about a, like, for me, like with Yemen, it's like easy to get a guest because I know enough to know who not to trust. But when I don't know anything, it's like it'll take me about 6 to 8 months to figure out what's going on, and I have to like read and like learn about 100 years worth of history. And by the time I can figure out a guest I can trust, that's c'est la vie, I guess. People just have to. Yeah, I just need to. Okay.
Ollie's just going to be 2 minutes.
Go ahead. Is Ollie here yet?
No, he said he'd be 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Let him take his time. Yes, we are talking to Luna, so we'll absolutely have a Vietnam episode in the upcoming weeks. Today we recorded a really debunking with Lumpin. That might be a good one. I like that. What do you think?
I like that one.
Okay, we're going to put that on the list too. So we have 2 lists. I don't like that. The PP show. I don't like that. Yuck. Okay. I don't like vulgar jokes. I need highbrow jokes. Like, vulgar jokes aren't funny to me.
I know. I'm bad.
No, I prefer like double entendres. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, so we'll definitely have an episode with Luna. So yeah, and today we just we had rapper Shanju on. For historically, we recorded a really long episode about the history of Taiwan. It's really cool. So that's coming out soon. Yeah. Okay, we could have Berletich or Berletic. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Okay, maybe. We'll see. I will put him on the list. Like I said, I was just ranting and going into a stream of consciousness in that it's like when you're an imperialist show. Yeah, please put more suggestions. Somebody else asked. Okay, I need to hook up. Like you have to like connect me with him more directly. He is not responding to my tweets. So somebody's gonna have to do something to get him here. Pull some strings or something. I'd love to have him on. Dr. Morandi. I love him. He's really good. He's he's often on Press TV, and I've seen him in RT and even on like on Indian TV too, like Doordarshan, and maybe in BBC. Like, so yeah, I totally would love that. So what was going? Yeah, so I was just going through a rant about why it's so nerve-wracking for me to like. Yeah, it'll take me about 6 months probably to learn enough about the history, because I'm a historical materialist, so like I don't easily trust people. Like I've never really trusted TYT, but they're okay for like for myself. Like I can look at any news, and I know, and like I can kind of get the idea of what's going on, regardless. But I just can't expect everyone else to be that aware of everything that's going on, so I have to be more responsible. And so yeah, that's why it's the hardest for me is to find the first guest in a so I'm gonna have to figure out, like, I'm gonna have to study a lot, and then but I will try to speed it up. Like I've already studied what was Privyet? It means hello. I will answer it later. I can't answer while I'm streaming. Somebody asked, you have not answered the tweet. Okay. So Okay, I will not explain. Okay, somebody said Dr. Bleep and Bleep. Well, I have a personal prejudice against him because he has a Dehradun accent, which is very shallow, and I should not have a personal prejudice despite him going to a fancy boarding school, which is Dehradun. But whatever. We will. I'll try to work through my own issues with the Dehradun liberals. Yeah. I just that. I know it's like crazy. Everyone likes him, but he went to Dehradun. I don't want to mention his name because I don't want to gossip. Bleep and bleep. Just ask Jenny Lynn, and she can privately tell you. But yeah, Dehradun is this really fancy private school in the mountains. It's like for super rich, and snobby pro-British Indians. So I kind of just like, I don't know, I just have a psychological block when I hear somebody speak like they went to Dehradun. And I don't know why I know this, but I do. And I'm like, oh.
I'm letting Ollie in now.
Is he here?
Yeah, he's coming in right now. It'll probably take a second for him to jump up, so let me...
Awesome. Okay, so I'm still ranting about Dehradun.
Yeah, rant for a second, because he...
Okay, so Dehradun... Okay, so that's probably why I can't have Dr. Bleep and Bleep. I want to like him, but I know it's a psychological prejudice and it's stupid, but we're going to have to work through that. Like, I don't know. So I heard you can do like some sort of emotional tapping to help reduce like emotional block. I don't know how it works, but if anyone guys know about the emotional tapping, I don't know. Does that work? What
for anxiety?
I don't. Hey, Ali, how are you doing? So right now we have Ali Vargas. He lives in Bolivia, right?
Can't hear audio. His audio's missing. His mic is on, but I mean,
okay. We'll just have to wait a minute. Okay. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, we can
hear you perfectly. Hey, Ali. It's so nice to have you. Thank you so much for agreeing to come. It's a pleasure. I've been a big fan of yours for a long, long time.
It's fantastic. No, I'm a big fan. I studied history, so it's an honor to be on a show like this.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Do you live in Bolivia or Peru?
In Bolivia.
Okay, but you're covering the elections in Peru. So what's going on right now?
As many of you know, a narrow electoral victory by Pedro Castillo, who's a left-wing socialist candidate, by about sort of 50.17%, I think it is at the moment. And the voting, although there's a tiny number of votes still left to be counted, his difference is more than the number of votes that are left to count. So his victory is a done deal, and he's been recognized as president-elect. He's been referred to as president-elect by the governments of Bolivia, Argentina, Nicaragua, and pretty much all of the social movements, main left political parties in Latin America. However, the right-wing candidate, Keiko Fujimori, the defeated candidate, now on a third presidential election, is refusing to recognize the results. She's claiming that electoral fraud somehow took place against her. This is despite the fact, that there's a right-wing government currently in power. Pedro Castillo's party has never held state power. They have no one, no allies within the state machine. But she's not accusing, for the moment, the electoral authorities of fraud. She's saying that people, private individuals were there, manipulating the vote and changing the votes. And she's put across a number of really bizarre sort of claims of evidence for this. So one of them was she accused 3 men in a rural town near Bolivia of fraud because there were vote counters and they all had the same surname, Catacora, which incidentally is the maternal surname of Bolivia's president as well.
Luis Arce is maternal surname?
Yeah, so in Bolivia you have the surname of your dad and your mother, of your father.
Okay, like a hyphen. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so his name is Luis Arce Catacora. But these three guys are called Catacora as well. And she said they're all part of a family and they're all like manipulating the vote for Castillo. But the electoral authorities had to come out and say, no, these guys are unrelated. They were picked at random, in the same way people pick jury service. So no, that was debunked. And they said that if she doesn't apologize, they're going to sue for defamation. But and other sorts of evidence presented include things like, someone's signature on the voting table was like a tiny little bit different from on their ID card, and is mostly, is of young people who maybe, the signature from their ID card was from when they were like 16 or something. So, you can figure them having a slightly different one now. But yeah, those are the sorts of accusations being made by Fujimori. I think that this whole strategy is not about fraud in itself, but about sort of buying time to create a chaos in the country, similar to what they did in Bolivia. And once you have chaos in the country, violence, then, well, someone needs to step in and restore order.
Okay, so it's exactly like the 2008 Bolivia. I mean, that was so scary and bizarre with the concept. Or are you too young for that?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to tell, but she's already herself sort of moved the battle, in her words, away from fraud and more into the political terrain. So she held a press conference a couple of days ago, actually I think yesterday, it was, just saying that, this is a battle against communism. She said, this is a confrontation between communism and the free market. That's what's at stake here. So, so she was essentially moving her complaint, her cause, away from a sort of administrative problem into a political one. Showing her hand essentially.
So that way you can get kind of, I guess, paramilitaries or whatever. That's very frightening. Are there paramilitaries like there were in Bolivia, like right-wing around in Peru?
Well, at the moment, there hasn't been a huge amount of violence, but that was the case in Bolivia. A lot of the sort of paramilitary groups sprung up seemingly spontaneously and seemingly out of nowhere, groups that hadn't existed before, but suddenly had a whole structure and a whole, had arms, had their own uniforms and things like this. So, we'll have to wait and see. But I think her strategy is to sort of keep making complaints about fraud that have to be investigated, and in that time where they're being investigated, sort of stoke, rile people up to the point where they're willing to come out with violence.
Is there like a schedule or something where it'll be too late to appeal with regards to fraud? Like, when do these votes get finalized?
Well, the deadline was supposed to be on Wednesday.
2 days from today?
No, Wednesday.
So they're already late.
But then that was extended, and then that was reversed. But I mean, she did already present numerous complaints before that deadline. So it's going to be a long time before they go through and discount each one of these. And in that time, the people in the streets every day. And if this process could take weeks and weeks, so what's going to happen in that time?
Okay, so when's the new president supposed to be inaugurated, I guess, if everything ran according to schedule?
If I'm not mistaken, around sort of late August.
Oh, okay. So is that okay? So that the normal schedule would be the new president would be inaugurated around late August.
Yeah, but with all of she's presenting, trying to nullify hundreds of thousands of votes. So the time that it takes to go through each of those claims takes you up until near that point, right? So this is part of the strategy, to just delay. In the meantime, the whole country is in the streets, and anything can happen.
And I guess So it seems like, I guess, okay. So Evo Morales has already come out against this, and like, is Bolivia offering any support or any kind of guidance to help Pedro Castillo, or not really?
Well, the act of referring to him as president-elect was, the aim of that is to give Pedro Castillo a degree of international legitimacy, and when that is told to the Peruvian people that you have this president backing this president, recognizing him as a government, as a president-elect, that places a level of confidence among his supporters that this is a done deal, and in wider society that, look, Pedro Castillo has international recognition, legitimacy. So I think that's really important. Throughout not just the president of the Senate, Evo Morales himself. I think it's an important contribution, that act of recognizing. I think also Argentina recognized, and Nicaragua as well. And I think it's quite interesting how Pedro Castillo thanked Nicaragua and the president of Nicaragua a couple of days ago after they recognized him. I think that's a signal as well about the sort of foreign policy that he'd have, that he's very much in line with the rest of the Latin American left, especially a country like Nicaragua that's being attacked at the moment.
That makes sense. So I guess there's also, last week we had Kayla on, and she said there's a case pending against Keiko Fujimori. Do you know much about it? Like, what's going on with, like, I heard like she has a second incentive because there's a case pending against her in court.
Yeah, I mean, her supporters say that it's impossible for her to be corrupt because she's not in government. However, the case against her refers to the last presidential election.
What year was that?
2014.
Okay. So it was about 6 years ago. So 7 years ago. So what happened there with the case? What is the case alleging for, I guess?
No, 2016 it must be then.
Okay.
Yeah. The last presidential elections 4 or 5 years ago. And she came first in the first round by a very large margin, and then again lost very narrowly in the second round. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people thought that she would win. And in that campaign, she received millions and millions of campaign donations from the infamous Brazilian company Odebrecht, the one that paid out bribes to like all politicians across the whole of the Americas, really. And the idea was that they would finance her campaign, and then she'd give them state contract once in power.
Literally quid pro quo.
Yeah. And this money was distributed throughout her party, and they did a number of tricks to sort of launder it, to hide its origin. And that came out. And so she's now facing charges for corruption, money laundering, and criminal activity, like in the organization that she built to hide the money, and this sort of thing. And one of the judges for this sort of anti-corruption task force that was set up has recommended a 30-year jail sentence for her. And the courts haven't sentenced her yet for that. But what they have done is they put a number of sort of preventive measures, like she can't leave the country. At the beginning of the campaign, she couldn't leave her home city, Lima, the capital, and she couldn't go out and campaign in the other regions. And she appealed, and she actually got that overturned. But she's still not allowed to leave the country. She was invited to speak at this anti-communist freedom conference in Ecuador, and she couldn't go like a few weeks ago. So if she doesn't win, she is, she's naked in the face of this onslaught of legal cases that she has coming against her. Remember that her father, Alberto Fujimori, is the former dictator of Peru in the 90s. Mm-hmm. He's already in jail now, and his sentence is such that he'll die in jail. He's like in his 80s, and there's no chance of him being released. And one of her promises in the campaign was to give a presidential pardon to her dad. So if she doesn't win now, not only her father will spend the rest of his life in prison, will die in prison, and she is likely to face the rest of her life in prison. So it's an all or nothing campaign for her. She has, the world to win and absolutely everything to lose.
Aha, so the stakes are much higher. So like, and that's when the right wingers get the most vicious. Also, like we're
Yeah, and I mean at the stakes as well that like Pedro Castillo is a socialist, and there's a lot of powerful people who want to stop that at any cost. So put that on top of her personal stakes. It's the most high stake election there's been in a very long time.
Okay. And Pedro Castillo has promised a few things, like a new constitution, nationalizing some of the mines. So I guess, of course, we're going to have to ask, like, what can we expect the U.S. to do to like stop this?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we
already know what they have
done. A couple days ago about the U.S. ambassador in Peru. She has a long career as a CIA agent.
What's her name again?
Lisa Kenner. Lisa Kenner.
Okay, Lisa Kenner. You did mention. I saw that. Okay, so is she the new ambassador for Joe Biden?
Yeah. She was appointed like just after Joe Biden got in, but before that, she was like the number 2 for Pompeo. She was like his executive secretary.
Oh,
Pompeo.
My God!
Before that, she was in like the office, like political office of like, I don't know, Security Council or something for Iraq. She was in charge of Iraq, director of another thing to do with Iraq. This is in a sort of post-invasion era, the sort of looting period. And yeah, so they've put an incredibly, senior person in as ambassador in a country that, hasn't caused the US problems in a very long time. So it makes you think, why have they placed such a senior operative in a country like Peru? But I think we should look, broader than that, because a lot of the like mining interests in Peru are largely Canadian, not American.
Was she a Canada ambassador before?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, but she has a connection with Canada.
But I think Canada must be sort of drawing up their own strategies, because like the largest company, with a presence in Peru is Glencore. They're standing to lose, their extremely large mining concessions in the country. So there's a lot of riding. Peru also has lithium. Peru also has gas, oil, copper, and mercury. These are all things that Pedro Castillo has promised to nationalize. And I think the sort of risk analysts and these sorts of like...
the risk analyst?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole industry, especially in Latin America, of these like, they appear to be journalists, like the America's Quarterly magazine and stuff. They are basically risk analysts, and they, analyze the situation in Latin American countries and report back to the US government and various corporations about, how safe their investment is likely to be. And like with Pedro Castillo, they're very interested in, is he the real deal, or can he be like bought off or like swung around? And like one guy, Brian Winter, who's the editor of America's Quarterly, he recently said that I fear that Pedro Castillo is part of the second sort of destructive group of Latin American leftists, but we'll have to wait and see.
Wow. Well, I'm still working on this article, which I'm waiting for like a few FOIA requests about Bolivia. But with Evo Morales, they suggested that they put in some guy to head the petroleum industry, and then Evo Morales ignored him, and then they realized, okay, you can't bribe him, so now we have to get rid of him, and that's when they started to do the coup. But so I can only imagine, and it's going to be a lot harder in Peru for the left, because it's just the way Peru's history and everything's worked. It's like much harder than Bolivia, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. The left has never held power in Peru in the way they have done in Bolivia or in the rest of Latin America. Another difficult point is that his party, Peru Libre, doesn't have a majority in Congress. So in the first round,
in Congress?
No one. In the first round, there was like 18 candidates, and Peru Libre came first with 19%. So then you have around 19% in Congress. They've got another like 5 seats from a different left party, but that still barely makes up a third. So then the rest is like 10 different right-wing parties, basically. So that's going to be another difficult point.
Oh, okay. So it'll be like an oppositional Congress. So how do like bills get passed? Like, is it that the Congress and then the president has to sign? Like, how does it work in Peru?
Well, in countries like Peru and Bolivia, you don't have to get too stuck down in the rules. You know, there are ways of making things work. I think it's really important for him will be the process of writing a new constitution, and for that you need a constituent assembly.
And how does that work?
Well, it can work in a number of different ways. The way it worked in Bolivia was essentially they convened a new Congress and held elections for it. And instead of political parties running for representation, it was like citizens groups and social movements. So the mass put forward all of their social movements, unions, indigenous groups, indigenous women's confederations, and the right sort of put forward a, Concerned Citizens Alliance or whatever. And the mass aligned social movements got a majority, and then they were the ones who drew up the new constitution. In Chile is like worked out a little bit different. It's more like by parties, alliance of different parties. So we'll have to see what it's like in Peru. I mean, Peru is a country where the left looks to Bolivia in a big way. So hopefully it could be more in the Bolivian style. And that process produced a constitution in which it says the natural resources of the country belong to the people, and privatizing that is completely prohibited, is unconstitutional. So that's like the most important part of the Bolivian constitution. So hopefully that's the sort of thing that they'll be looking to replicate in Peru. I think there's no way around, there's no way that he'll be able to govern with the Congress it is. He'll have to find a way to overcome that. I think the Constituent Assembly is probably the best way.
We have one question from the audience. So Jenna, if you're able to put it up, Dimitri Polemikos asks, one question for Ali. Can you describe the self-coup that took place with the elder Fujimori, interested in military's role?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's become a sort of a landmark case example. So Alberto Fujimori was elected perfectly legitimately in 1990. Perfectly democratically. But then 2 years later, he decides to launch this self-coup in which he invites the military to launch a coup against the institutions of the state, which is, Congress, the justice system, essentially shut down all opposition so that he can govern unilaterally with the military. And that went on for 8 years, right? It was quite successful on its own terms of being able to completely destroy, repress any opposition, massacres, disappearances, mass arrests, torture, all of the set menu of a Latin American sort of military dictatorship, and that was the last dictatorship Peru has had, the legacy is obviously still here in that Keiko Fujimori was the first lady of that dictatorship when she was 19 years old, because his wife left him before he became president. So he was single when he became president. So she was the official first lady, and she wasn't a passive one. She was very, very, very involved politically throughout that dictatorship. So she basically spent the whole of her life at the top of politics, right? Well, first in state power and the dictatorship, and then she spent the rest of the 20 years, of her life trying to get that power back, unsuccessfully so far.
And I guess, so Peru has a lot of income inequality, and so there's a big divide between the haves and the haves not, right?
Yeah, I mean, Peru is it was always shown as an example of like successful neoliberalism because like for 20 years they've had it's been a democracy, or democracy, relatively stable, like a liberal democracy, I should add, and it's had like quite strong economic growth. It's always, I mean, for the last sort of 10 years, Bolivia has been the number one spot for economic growth, but Peru was always second. Like they've always had very, very, very strong, consistent growth. But the difference is in Bolivia, that growth was driven by state industry, state-led investment and things, whereas in Peru, that it was the free market, neoliberalism. So that wealth was never redistributed, and you have a situation where like the Peruvian middle class, upper class is incredibly large. It's not a small number of people. I used to live in Peru, and I was so surprised at the difference between just how much bigger the Peruvian bourgeoisie was compared to the Bolivian bourgeoisie. And you have people that are so rich, and like in Bolivia, I think when I see people who are rich, I often think that if they were to move tomorrow to Europe or North America, they basically wouldn't be rich. They'd probably be like lower middle class with their net value. However, in Peru, there are people who are seriously rich who would still be rich even if they were in the global north. And you have a situation where you have people with such enormous wealth taking up large sections of the city, not a small portion, and then at least a third of the capital city, Lima, which lives in total poverty, no running water. For a third of the city has no access to running water. They have to buy it from tanks that come into the neighborhood, and they pay double the price of that than what rich people pay to have it from their taps in the center of the city. A lot of these places have no electricity, houses made out of corrugated iron and things like this. And that's just the capital, which is where almost all of the wealth of the country is concentrated. Outside the capital, in the provinces, there is a much deeper level of poverty. And that's why everywhere, from the Andes to the Amazon, and everywhere in between, Pedro Castillo won with 80 to 90%. Just landslide victories. People were never part of the country up until that point. And people from Lima don't recognize the rest of them as citizens. I mean, when I was there, there's always migration from the countryside to the city because of the rural poverty, because of like there's no export-import controls on agricultural goods, no sort of price controls. So that means if you're a campesino, you work agriculture, you basically, you give away your produce for free. You don't earn a serious income from that. So there's mass migration to the city, capital city, and the people. But the people in the city, the middle class, the white middle class, talk about them as if they're immigrants, they're foreigners. Like, they're coming here and
because they took them as out of towners.
They're not recognized as part of the country, even though they're fellow citizens. They're talked about as if they're immigrants from a completely different culture and country. So all of those people feel no part in the state, in the mainstream of political life. So that's why there was these block votes, like completely block votes. In the mining towns where Glencore operate, 90%. One place had 96% for Pedro Castillo. In the Amazon, it was 70% Pedro Castillo. In the Andean areas, it was like 85% Pedro Castillo. Whereas in Lima, it was 68% Fujimori and like 30% Castillo. So you can see that like just total like gap between the urban and the rural.
Aha. And that that makes a lot of sense. So because it's so much more bifurcated, it's a lot more geographical.
Yeah, I mean, Peru is just a badly planned place because almost 40% of the electorate is in Lima. It has like 40% of the population of the whole country in one city, and everywhere else has been emptied out. A process which in itself causes a lot of poverty. So it's just a completely unbalanced society in terms of like demographics and like where people live, and like obviously where the wealth is concentrated. So this was like such a provincial rebellion, well, a rebellion of everyone against the big metropolis. It's the peasants that surrounded the city. I think that is a good way to characterize it. And this is really similar to the situation in Bolivia. The mass don't win in any of the big cities in Bolivia, but in the rural areas, 80, 90% outnumbers, and they win.
They would do what? Are you there?
Sorry?
Oh, you cut off. Can you repeat the last sentence?
I said it's the same situation with the mass in Bolivia, where they only get perhaps 20 to 30% in the big cities, and then 80 to 90% in the rural areas, and then that minority vote in the city together with the rural vote squashes the urban middle class. And the urban middle class feel like their country's been stolen from them because they don't know a single person that votes for the left. They don't know a single person in their entire neighborhood, anyone they work with. No one votes. Where are all these votes coming from? You've got all these peasants just stealing the country and the state.
Okay, this makes so much sense. It's like they're living in a different world because they're so disconnected from each other.
Absolutely.
I said it's like they're living. Okay, this makes so much. Now I understand how they get that temptation to resort to violence because it feels like they're in a different world, right?
Yeah. I feel like something that is theirs is being taken away from them. So if you're in Lima and everyone 68% of the city, and all of that 68% of the city is 100% of your friends and family and co-workers. And then you got all these rural people coming in to take the state that is right outside your window, the Congress and presidency. What the hell? How's that fair? We're having our property taken away from us. We own this. We own those buildings. And there's a bunch of foreigners we don't know coming in and thinking they can take control of it. It's really humiliating. And we're the only, these people, they can't even read, they're ignorant, look at them, we're the good people, we've studied in the United States, we go to Miami to buy clothes. How can we be governed by those people? How is that possible? We're having the state stolen from us.
Okay. So this makes so much sense. I didn't understand. It took me. There was a lot of mysteries where I just didn't understand how this happened in Bolivia. But now that you mentioned that makes so much sense now. Oh, by the way, you mentioned something about the Lima Group. What? I've never figured out what exactly is the Lima Group and what do they do? And you made a joke about it. So.
Yeah, the Lima Group was set up after the whole Juan Guaido declaring himself president thing, and it was set up as basically an alliance of the US and Canada with the right-wing governments in Latin America, which at that time were the large majority. So they had Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, Paraguay as well. And it was designed so that it appeared that it was the Latin American countries taking the lead rather than the US and Canada. However, obviously it was the US and Canada setting the agenda, but in the press conferences, it'd be the Latin Americans that wheeled out to, be the face of it. The problem with this, and the reason it's now collapsing, I'm not even sure if it still exists. It hasn't met for quite a long time, and almost all of its, half of its members have disappeared. So Agnes signed Bolivia up to this. They have now pulled out. Argentina's pulled out. Peru is set to pull out its seat, its main place. Colombia is a mess right now. It's chaos, and they can't hold meetings there. Chile right now is, the right has been defeated in the constituent elections, and you have a member of the Communist Party of Chile first in the polls there. You have Lula ahead in the polls in Brazil. So who they're going to be left with? It looks like it's going to be United States and Paraguay or something. So it's not really, it's something that has sort of collapsed in on itself as the members, as the right-wing governments that were the members have their own internal rebellions and are overthrown.
Aha. Okay. Well,
But the
can't
point of,
cry
sorry,
about
I think the point of it though, of this alliance, is that it wasn't a general alliance, like a general organization. It had one goal, which is to attack Venezuela, isolate Venezuela.
But you can't isolate Venezuela if everyone else
enforce sanctions, this sort of thing. So now that it's starting. It's starting to come apart. It's starting to come apart.
Well, and it's going to be good to have. Well, I'm glad that they can't isolate Venezuela. By the way, I follow Ali. He's a reporter at, how do you pronounce it? I've never figured out how to pronounce the website.
Such a news.
Yeah, I've always, it's KASA. I'll put in the link. But I love it. It's like a really wonderful site. One of my favorites. And you offer a lot of English language stories about South America, which is, I think, good because North Americans need to understand what's going on. And I'm glad you do that. It's Kawasachin. How do you pronounce it once more? Kawasachin News. Yeah, there are wonderful articles, so please check it out. And is there any other websites besides this that you write for?
I sometimes contribute to different websites, but no, the Kawasachin News is, we only launched it like a sort of month and a half ago. And
I love it.
It's still in its early stages. We're hoping to build it up a lot more.
Well, like I said, I've been like visiting it every day because there's so much good news. Like it's something I know, like I before you came in, I was talking about problems of like trusting sources about Latin America because, well, you know how people up here are. And this is like one of those where I can relax and not worry and know that it's going to be just good, actual factual news and no propaganda.
Yeah. And that, like, an important part of the project is that this isn't like a personal project sort of about, a couple of people doing their thing. This is like an English language unit of a Bolivian outlet, the Bolivian media outlet called Radio Kawasachin Coca. Which is the property of the Six Federations, which is the Coca Growers Union, and Evo Morales himself is the president of it. And it's the most important social movement in Bolivia. It's where everything started and everything continues to be. So it's more in that. It's not about sort of individuals and their sort of preferences and stuff. It's more in the politics of the social movements in Bolivia.
Well, and it's reader supported?
Yeah, we have a Patreon. Be great. We're hoping to like expand coverage and like maybe get more people, better equipment. So it'd be really great if people could help out on the Patreon. But yeah, we are attached as well to the radio station. This is the offices I'm speaking you from. We're in the Tropico of Cochabamba, which is a rural area. We're not in a city. It's a rural area. It's a tropical area, coca growing area, and this is where the MAS was founded in the struggles that are led by Evo against the DEA, against the US military presence. And this is this is the party bastion, this is the party stronghold. This is where the party was created and is recreated.
Okay. And are you going to go back to Peru, or are you going to you just plan on staying in Bolivia for a while?
Yeah, we'd really like to go to Peru. We're actually we are analyzing that situation at the moment, because I think the situation is going to get very serious there. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, if it does get better. And the coup attempt led by Fujimori right now is a serious one. We've seen this all before in Bolivia, so we would like to be there. We're analyzing that situation. We're seeing if we've got enough funds for it, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming, and hope we can have you back again in the future. This was very informative. Keep us up to date. Everyone follow Ali on Twitter. And definitely go to Kawasachin News. It's actually I have it bookmarked on my tab in Chrome, but I did not I did not learn how to pronounce it because my mind didn't pronounce it. I don't know.
The name comes from the slogan in this region.
What does it mean?
The traditional slogan in this region in Quechua is Causachun Coca, Wainuchun Yankees. And that means long live Coca, death to the Yankees.
Yes, I agree with you. Long live, coca leaves are different than cocaine in that you can use it for like skin cream. When I was in Colombia, they made it like, you can also use it for air sickness. Like you can make like dip it in a tea. Like it's not like cocaine. It's just completely different than cocaine.
Yeah, absolutely. I chew coke every day. It's great, especially if you're doing manual work or like it represses hunger a bit. It sort of gives you a bit of like steady energy, and you can have it as tea. There's like loads of products as well. Like there's like coca shampoo and like.
Yeah,
coca.
in Colombia they had that. They had the coca shampoo, and I remember like the tea was actually did help with air sickness. Actually, it was weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. There's coca liquor as well, drink,
Okay.
coca cake, yeah, all sorts. Coca sweets, obviously.
Okay, yeah. So like I said, people just kind of up here don't understand that it's like not like your snort. It's like the leaf is a completely different product than the cocaine. It's like I don't even.
It's a bag of coke leaves here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and everyone, please follow Ali. And this was a pleasure. Oh my, that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And well, I just became a Patreon, so everyone else also become a patron, whatever that is. Anyways, and thank you so much, and hope to see you. I guess we'll have you back on in not too long of a future. It's going to be fun.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Okay. Okay. So everyone, please, can you just put up my PayPal thingy so that people can donate to it? Yeah. People, I know I'm almost monetized, but we could use like a few bucks here and there. So here's our PayPal scan in code. Yeah. And also check out both. Wait. Yeah. Please scan in the PayPal if you can. Please come, and we really need the help. And hopefully we can get it monetized, but we need you to watch like if every one of you watches a few videos here and there, it's going to be fantastic that we can get monetized. We're like we need about like 600 hours now, I think. And that's like basically if everyone who follows me on Twitter, Connie, I will put that video up. I have it with me actually. The video of Evo Morales at the UN speech. I'll put that video up on all of the sites. So you'll see it. I'll put it up on TikTok actually and tweet out the link. Yeah. So with that, hopefully we will figure out how to make this format funny, cool. If you have any suggestions, please tweet at us. And hopefully we will have something else for next week.